Lord, for this community that you've given us to share your word. We pray for me that you'll help me to express clearly what are on your mind, Lord, for us this afternoon. And Lord, this will be interesting and helpful, and all of us will walk out with something very, very practical to do. We pray in your name, that's Lord Jesus. Amen. Amen. Okay, so we are going to just do a very quick recap in case there's anybody here who missed it. So, I mentioned that when I was young, many years ago, I was able to get into schools, and through discipling people, we started the first team. I'll show you a little chart of how this occurred to me. So, I don't know if you can see that. It's in German, so I put German slide in there by mistake. If you just, if you imagine when I was doing schools work, I was able to reach about 10,000 students, but I was able to integrate into the family of God less than 10 per year. So I could recruit, I could reach a lot, but not necessarily bring many into the local church. But by concentrating on my individual skills to recruiting others and training them what I did, now we've reached millions and integrated thousands. Wow. Now in that time, I didn't get less busy, I just got cleverer, right? So I started to adopt what Jesus did. Okay, so take other people with you and show them how to do what you do, and you'll multiply what you do. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about a little bit. And then I think I should quickly explain. We started in England. This is just in case people come to a Masterclass and who were in the service beforehand. And then we, there we go. And then that's where we are right now. And then just lastly on this, I want to start this idea of a movement. So if you want to spark a movement, I think there are 3 stages or 3 steps to spark any kind of movement. Whether that's individually in yourself, you're moving from something to something, i.e. from Christian-centric to kingdom-centric, or you're trying to start a movement within the church, or a movement within a community. There are 3 things you need, and that's what we're going to go through today. So the first one is, we need to move from the old message to a new message. So my message is kingdom-centric. Moving from this idea of, I pursue my vision, I do it God's way, so God gives me what I want. So I pursue God's kingdom, I do it God's way, so I give him what he wants. And that is absolutely key. And we'll talk about it in a minute. After that, you need to go from the old methods to new methods. So I've got friends who are leaders in church, and they would say, well, we want to go from a church that's just putting on a great big program and attracting people. I know it's about discipling people, but when I go to a conference, all I hear is how to put on a great program and bring people to this church. So you need a new message, but you also need new tools. And that's what we're going to talk about today as well. And then finally, the third thing you need is going from old measurements to new measurements. So most churches in Australia, I'm told, have the ABC of church. Is that correct? So attendance, buildings, and cash. So I went to a church in a mega church, I served a mega church in America, and every Tuesday, as leaders, we would assess how many people are in the building, how's the debt going on the building, and how much do people give, how much were the tithes this year compared to this year, last year, A, B, C. So I thought, wouldn't it be great to come up with an X, Y, Z of kingdom-centric? A kingdom-centric, but I couldn't think of anything. Those letters are really hard to work with. But what I will do is I will talk about later on is how we can measure our effectiveness in discipleship. So we're going to start with the first one, which is a new message. And then, so I feel really rude doing this in the sorry, but there we go. I don't know if you've heard this phrase, our methods must change, but our message must remain the same. I think this is a load of nonsense. Your methods never change unless your message changes first. Because I'm old, when I was younger, the message was turn or burn. Right? So I love turn or burn, it was great, alright? You just said turn or burn and people got saved, it was amazing. But then it affected our methods, okay? So we'd have Sunday night gospel service, and it was all about proclamation. I would go on the streets, which is good, and we reached people on the streets. I did door-to-door knocking, I did all that kind of stuff, it was all proclamation. And then something changed, and it became preach the gospel at all times, and if necessary, use words. So now I work with a generation who literally don't know how to lead someone to Jesus. They know how to show God's love, but they don't know how to lead someone into faith. Because the message changed, and that changed the methods. Now they give out a bottle of water and think that's the gospel. Yeah. Well, it's great, it's good, it shows God's love, but it has to go beyond that, right? So what is the message, and what do we understand about the gospel? Well, it says this. Sorry, let's move past that. Sorry, next. There we go. Okay, Jesus went out to a mountainside to pray and spent the night praying to God. When morning came, he called his disciples to him and chose 12 of them, whom he also designated apostles. I think we're still going through sort of recap. I'm sorry, it's going to recap. So he talks about this idea of moving from students. So you come to church, you learn what Jesus knew, you apply the bits you want to your life for a better life. That's being a student of Jesus. And what I'm hoping to help us understand is what it looks like to become a disciple for Jesus. Someone who's a disciple and who makes disciples. And so we have to ask the question, what is the message we understand about what discipleship actually is? So this is what Jesus said. Then Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me, therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. So when Jesus said discipleship, what was he thinking? Wife and I, the Foxy Lady, Lincoln to wave. That's the Foxy Lady. We've been married a long time, I think it's 36 years. When we got married, I think you can guess the decade by the picture actually. Okay. So when we got married, we were the same age, we were from the same place, and we went to kind of the same school. I went to the boys' school and she went to the girls' school, which was over the road. But we had very, very different backgrounds. My background is very male-dominated. So I went to an all-boys school, and even in primary school, the boys and the girls would mix during playtime. I had a dad, I had a brother, and a mum who was not really girly. So I didn't speak to girls properly until I was about 16 years old. Our house was very conservative, it was very cold. My dad was very frugal. So if it was cold, my dad would say, you know, I was cold. He would say, well, put on another pullover, right? In fact, he didn't like me saying this, I put it in the book, he was not happy. But sometimes in winter, he'd walk into my dad, and he's there in a ski suit, watching TV rather than put on the heating. So that's the background I'm from. When I met Lynn, she's from a completely female background, okay? So it's her 3 sisters, and her mum in a house. Crazy. The temperature was always high and it was super noisy. I had no drama in my house. I saw more drama in 2 days of living in Lynn's house when we first got married than my entire life. They were arguing, they were throwing cabbages at each other, literally, it was absolutely deadly. And nobody told anything what to do, it was very liberal, it was 2 different backgrounds. So, imagine a thought bubble. Go back a little. Sorry, imagine thought bubbles. I said to Lynn one day, will you marry me? And she said yes. But if you look at it visually, I basically said, Lynn, will you do this for the rest of our lives? And she said, yeah, let's do this for the rest of our lives. And we agreed to 2 completely different things. It was just something I just thought a man does and a woman does, and she thought the opposite, right? So we spent 6 years trying to merge those 2 bubbles together. 2,000 years ago, Jesus said to his bride, will you go make disciples? And 2,000 years later, we're going, yeah, we'll make disciples. And I think we agreed to something different. Yeah. So what I want to do in this first section is show you what was in his thought bubble. Does that make sense? Yeah. The way I'm going to do that is by contextual information. So Jesus did not invent discipleship. He came, he saw discipleship, and he figured that's the best way to get the message out. So discipleship pre-existed Jesus, and there were many different rules or principles that were written in Jewish teaching that he went along with. So I'm going to show you some of them really quickly. And I want you to just, as you look at these, ask yourself the question, what's different between this and what we understand as discipleship? Okay, first one. In the Mishnah, it says, your father brings you into the world, but your rabbi brings you into the world to come. The Olam Haba, which is what we would call heaven. So he's basically saying, your natural father's good because he shows you how to do life, but your spiritual father brings you into the world to come. Does that make sense? Next. A man's father and rabbi are both taken captive. A disciple should ransom his rabbi first. That's pretty heavy stuff. If that father and rabbi carried a heavy burden, he removes first that of his master and afterwards that of his father. So there was a high value placed on being a disciple and what you're getting from the disciple, what you're getting from the rabbi. If the disciple went into exile, his rabbi should go with him. So it's two-sided. Can you see there's a principle here? I don't know if you can see it yet. Unlike the slave performs for his master, a disciple performs for his rabbi except untying the sandals. What does that remind you of? What story in the Bible does that remind you of? Oh, I know you're all theological geniuses. Shall we wave? Give me a wave. We're going to be interacting. Yes, going to leave it back.
Washing the feet.
Washing the feet, yeah. Well, there's absolutely. But something else more specific. What did John say?
I'm not fit to tie shoes.
That's right. So John says, I'm not fit to tie his shoes. Do you remember that in the Bible?
Yeah.
I always thought that was just a random statement. It's amazing. I'm not even fit. I don't know to tie his shoes. John was referring to the one thing a disciple didn't have to do for his rabbi. And he's basically saying, the one thing I'm not supposed to do, I don't have to do, I'm not even willing to do that. So John understood, and Jesus understood this disciple relationship. The one I find fascinating is this. A man could follow a rabbi without permission from his wife for up to 30 days. So let's explain how this works, okay? So the difference, you've got students, they just want to listen. You've got disciples who went and followed, right? So basically, I won't go into all the details, but the Sanhedrin came up with certain rules to implicate the law, or to execute the law. And what they came up with is this. They said, it's okay, so if let's say there's Ken. Is Ken still here? Yeah. So Ken's in the field, he's working hard, his favourite rabbi comes, he can basically down tools and say, okay, I'm going to follow this guy, I'm going to become his disciple for at least 30 days.
And not tell Mandy.
And not tell Mandy, yeah. And he just disappeared. Yeah, and his wife, Mandy couldn't say anything, but after 30 days, he has to go and get permission.
Oh.
Now, I don't know what that is, so you can, I know what happened to somebody, and they'll go, sure, if you want to go off with your boyfriend, that's fine. That's what basically happened. So can you see, there's kind of like, there's certain things that connect to these, I don't know if you can see them. There's one more. Oh yeah, go back, sorry, if you go back. Can you see the connection? Almost all of them are about journey. Even the Samuel one. It's about going on a journey with someone, right? Discipleship is about going on a journey with someone and taking people on the journey with you. And so that's why we asked this morning this very simple question. If Jesus took people on an experience that led to education, why do we educate people and hope they have an experience? So why take people on an experience? Why is that? What's your name? Jen, would you mind just doing something for me? This is very simple, you don't have to do anything after you have to answer 2 questions. Okay, so James, you ever had an itch on your back where you can't scratch it?
Yes, of course.
Okay, and how does that feel?
Irritating.
Okay. So if you asked someone and they scratched it, even if it's quite hard, how would that feel?
Doesn't matter because you got the spot.
Yes, it feels good, right? Okay. So imagine now that someone, you don't have that itch at all, you're just fine, and someone comes and scratches you on your back, how would that feel? There's no need, so how would it feel then? Uncomfortable. You don't say painful because you're a man, but yeah, probably quite painful, right? Painful? No, it's good. Painful and uncomfortable. Uncomfortable is a better word, actually, uncomfortable. What is the difference? It's not the scratch, it's how itchy you are, right? So Jesus comes, and some people are itchy, and they want to crown him, and some people are not itchy, and they want to crucify him. He's saying the same thing to people, but it's whether they're itchy or not. What makes people itchy is an experience. If you take people on an experience, that's when they start to ask you questions. Thank you so much, mate. Appreciate it. So, years ago, when we took... yeah, give him a round of applause. He needs the attention. So many years ago, we helped a youth ministry in America, a massive mega church, and they had this youth ministry, and none of the kids came to it. And they met in these They were from all different parts of the city, and they met in different areas. And so they would come to the church, and if you're from the north of the city, you went in the north room, south room, east room, west room. And none of the kids turned up. So what we did was said, okay, all of our volunteers have a different gift. Some's sports, some's feeding, like hospitality, some of it's prayer. We're going to go into our community. You can come with us and see what we do. Does that make sense? Yeah. So some would like to do sports with the kids and then share the gospel with them. Some would feed the kids and then share the gospel with them. My favourite was a guy who his gift was intercessory prayer. So he booked a room in an apartment block, like a whole area, and he put flyers in all the rooms, or all the houses, and said, if you need prayer for anything, come to this room for half an hour between 6:30 and 7. And all the youth used to go with him. Some of the youth signed up to go with him, I should say. Take about probably 20 young people with him. And he'd pray for people. He said you could not shut the kids up asking questions on the way back. Why did this one get healed and this one didn't get healed? Why did you do it this way and this one but you did it that way with the other? Experience makes people literally. Your experience can make people literally. What we do is put people in the room and tell them things, they're not giving answers to questions they're not asking yet. Yeah. So it's experience that makes people itch, and I'll explain why and how, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. So what we said this morning was this, and if you can put the subject lines up, the little taglines on them. What are you doing to advance God's kingdom? How are you doing it? And who are you doing that with? What are you doing to advance God's kingdom? How are you doing that? And who are you doing it with? Okay, next slide, please. If you remember, I want you to think about that now, because in a minute we're going to break up into little groups so you can think it through. So I want you to bear in mind these three things. If you pull up on the screen, that would be great. So the first one is there's no need to disciple anyone in anything. Jesus chooses students, and he says, I'm doing the work of an apostle, I'm preaching and healing the sick and excellent. I want to come and do what I do. But there are many things he doesn't teach them, as far as we know. So what's that? You don't have to disciple everyone, you don't have to know everything. You don't have to disciple people in everything. What's that one thing you can show people how to do? Is it prayer? Is it Bible study? Is it hospitality? Is it evangelism? What is that one thing? Secondly, no need to disciple anyone forever. How long would it take to disciple someone? We have people come on for a year, 2 years, and 3 years to learn what I do, or learn what we do. And then thirdly, no need to disciple everyone equally. Okay, so it might be some people you're really intensive with, and other people not so much. So how many people could you disciple do what you do? Could you take a large group? Could you take 1 or 2 people? Let's go back to that previous slide, please. Just put the taglines up again if it's possible. So what I do is basically turn your chairs around to a group and just discuss with each other your answers to those 3 questions. Before you do it, I'm going to give you 60 seconds just to think it through, so we'll get one person dominating, okay? Just 60 seconds to think it through. If you've got your phone or piece of paper, just write your answer down now before you speak to people. So I'm going to give you 6 seconds, just quietness for everybody for 60 seconds. What are your answers to these 3 questions? What's the most effective thing you do to advance God's kingdom? What's one principle you've learned? And one practice you've learned? One thing you would teach something? Okay, can we go to the next slide? And then one after that, sorry. One after that. Okay. This is what I'd like you to discuss in your group, okay? What's the most effective thing you do? What's the one thing you can tell people you've learned doing that? If you were to pass on one principle or practice, what would it be? And how many people do you think you could take and disciple? Does that make sense, those questions? Give me a yes or no. Yes. Yes, so you're all thinking now in your group, okay. Okay, if you can get into your groups, give me 10 minutes to answer these questions, okay? Try not to dominate, try to get everybody answering, that'd be great. So just turn your chairs in on themselves into a little row, talk to people in your row, that'd be fantastic. Thank you. Okay, let me get 3 people who can give answers to those questions. And the 3 people in the room who can say, I know the answer to all 3 questions for yourself. If there's anyone like that, just put your hand up. Please stop enjoying yourselves in this listening. Anybody who's got answers to those 3 questions, they think they might have an answer to those 3 questions. Anybody? Yeah, okay.
Hello. I thought it was just like put your hand up, like yes, sweet, put up.
Okay, first question. What's the most effective thing you do to advance the kingdom of God, do you think?
Creating a safe space for youth every week.
Okay, create a safe space. Oh, so good at young people.
Yeah, and also making like the opportunity for them to have connection with the Lord.
Okay, so let's say you were discipling someone else, other youth leaders, some people want to be like you, and they want to learn what you learn. Just one principle, there's probably hundreds, but one principle, the biggest principle you teach that person. Hey, if you want to do what I do, here's what God has taught me, it's this.
That's
There's a lot.
yeah, there's a lot.
But
But
go on.
seek His kingdom first.
No, yeah, okay, so we'll give you a practical way of you doing that, because we all know we're supposed to seek first thing. Okay, so I'm a young youth leader, I want to learn from you. What's one principle, what's the first thing maybe you want to teach me about how to do what you do?
Make sure nobody's alone.
Pardon?
Make sure nobody's alone.
Make sure no one's alone. Fantastic, okay? And you probably have ways of doing that, right? Brilliant, okay? Okay, last thing is, how many people, or how would you let people know that you're available? So do you do that right now? Do people know that you're available to disciple them and how to do what you do?
Yes and no, but I'm always open to anything. So if anyone comes to me with anything, I'm always down to help.
Okay. So would I be right in thinking that in your mind you're available, but maybe people don't know that yet?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So how could you let them know that you're available?
Just jump up and yell at them.
That's not how it works.
I just let him know. Just letting him know.
How?
Having conversations.
Okay, so letting people go around and talk to people saying, hey, I'm available to help you do what I do.
Yeah, even just inviting him out to like get some dinner one night, or just keep a connection going.
Okay, cool, excellent. Okay, so it's just something to think through, because I think what happens there is a lot of us say, yeah, I'd love to train some people, we don't know how to let people know that. And I would guarantee there are people out there who might want to learn from you, but they need to know you're available. Does that make sense? So I do that, I go online. As far as I know, I was thinking about this last night, thank you. Give me a round of applause. You know it's most when I first started, as far as I know, Hayes was the first ministry, Christian ministry in England, as far as I know, that had a website. And I remember the first time somebody showed me how a website works. You ever anyone remembers those AOL discs? Remember them? And I was like, oh wow, the first thing I could recruit people to do this, right? So you need a way of letting people know we're available. And I'm doing an event next weekend to show churches how to do that, because we don't have a culture for that, right? So we don't have emotions, we don't have a culture. We say people get involved in our program, but we don't tend to have a culture where we say, hey, here's how to find out who's available to disciple you. So, okay, one other person, you've got answers to these 3 questions. Anybody? Okay, so I would recommend you think through those questions, right? So, what is it you do that's most effective? There's probably lots of things you do to serve God, but what do you see the most fruit from? And then make a record of what's God taught me about that in order to disciple someone else. Does that make sense? And then thirdly, think to yourself, well, how would I let people know that I'm available to disciple them that way? I think they're really crucial questions that can really make a big difference. And the other thing is, you don't have to think you're special to offer yourself as a disciple, because I might be able to disciple you in something, but then you can disciple me in something you do, right? So it's not that one person's amazing and everybody else is lesser in some way, it's we can all disciple each other in the things that God has uniquely taught us. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's move on then. Next slide, please. So let's talk about methodology. How do we actually disciple people? So the old rabbis saw... Okay, the old rabbis saw the health of their religion in having a theology without being aware of it. What do you think that means? What does it mean to have a theology but not be aware of it? Does it mean they didn't think theology was important? Does it mean they didn't talk about theology? What did they mean by having a theology? That was our aim. I want to help you get to a place where you have a theology that you're not aware of. What does that look like? The reason discipleship works so well, the reason Jesus chose it, because he didn't create it, the reason he chose discipleship was because it fits really well with the way our brains are changed, the way we change. So Romans 12 talks about renewing our mind, right? So our brain, we work a certain way. If you're a teacher, you will know some of this stuff. I'm going to spend about 15 minutes explaining how we learn and how we stop learning. And then I'm going to explain why I'm going to show you how to disciple someone. I'm going to explain how it works and how it fits to that. So I know you're not back at school, so forgive me, but I think if you have understanding, it's better than me sitting saying, do this. It helps you know why it works. Does that make sense? So let me show you how we stop learning. How do we stop learning? And some of you will have heard this before. Okay, there are four steps to how we learn, I should say. The first one is called unconscious incompetence, or I don't know what I don't know. I have two sons. My youngest son has been convinced he can drive a car from the age 6, right? Because he has an Xbox. So since he's about 6 years old, he said, Dad, I can drive a car. Dad, I can drive a car. He's completely daft, okay? He's unconsciously incompetent. He doesn't know what he doesn't know, okay? Maybe you become a Christian, you're like, oh, it's going to be amazing. I'm going to tell people about Jesus, and everyone's going to get saved. All my friends are going to get saved. It's going to be amazing. Well, I'm a Christian now, I'm going to be perfect now. It's like the state of ignorant bliss, right? Yeah. And then we go to what? Conscious incompetence, which is, which is, I know what I don't know. It's horrible. So I take my son, we took him to the car park, and I put him in the car. It wasn't automatic, it was manual. He put the foot down, he lifted his foot. The car didn't move forward, he went upwards. And we spent about the next 5 minutes bouncing like a kangaroo around that car park. And you can see the blood, after like years of telling me he could drive a car, suddenly you realise he didn't know how to drive a car. Or suddenly you go out, you become a Christian, and you tell your friends about Jesus and they laugh at you or they don't take you seriously. Or you think you're going to be perfect, and then suddenly you say something or do something or think something you shouldn't do. It's a horrible place to be. But actually, you're one step closer to your objective. Yeah. Yeah. Thirdly, it's conscious competence. I know what I know. So when you first start driving a car, for instance, you drive it, you have to think about what you're doing, right? Yeah. In England, we have mirror signal manoeuvre. So I'm driving a car, I'm looking at the speed limit, I'm like thinking, oh, that way I come to Australia, I'm driving around the other side of the road, the correct side, by the way. I'm driving on the other side of the road, and so you have to think about it for a little bit, right? You have to work it out and realise that wherever I'm in the world, if I can't remember which side I'm supposed to be on, the steering wheel is always closer to the centre of the road. That's saved my life about twice, right? So we have to think about it. So I know how to be a Christian, but I have to keep thinking about everything I do, right? I have to keep praying about, is this right, is this right? I have to keep checking it with the Bible, right? I have to keep asking my pastor, should I do this, is it okay to do this, or should I do this, or how do I do that? So we're consciously competent. So can anybody guess what the next one is? Absolutely, unconscious competence. I don't know what I know. In other words, I have a theology without being aware of it. It's just natural to me now. My next door neighbour years ago in England was a bus driver, not a lorry driver, a truck driver. He did the same route every day for years and years. And one day he rang me up and said, Paul, I'm in Birmingham and I don't know why. It's Saturday, I forgot. He just got up, he drove. It's like you, most of you who drove today, you drove here. You wouldn't think about driving, you think about, what's this guy going to be like, who's going to speak, who's going to be any good? Maybe a conversation you're going to have with somebody when you got here, maybe something you're going to do, maybe something on your mind about the Bible. You probably weren't thinking about the Bible. That's how we learn. And that's the objective. The objective is God to get us to a place where we don't have to do things like fleeces. God doesn't, God will use that, but really, okay, so my illustration of this is like, me and Lynn have been married for years, as I said before. Imagine, Lynn, I'm watching TV, and I'm flicking through channels. There's a house flipping program, you know when you house flipper. There's a cooking program, and then there's a rugby program where England's beating Australia at rugby. Okay, I'm watching those three things. Okay, maybe not. I'm watching those three things, and Lynn comes down the stairs, Imagine if I thought to myself, okay, right, I need to know, I wonder which one Lynn wants to watch. I know if she sits down and crashes her head, she wants to watch the house flipping. But she rubs her arm, she wants to watch the cookery. Or if she sneezes, she wants to watch the rugby. It'd be ridiculous, wouldn't it? Okay? Because I know her. I know what she wants. I know which of those 3 programs she's going to want to watch. We're still going to watch the rugby, obviously. But at least I know what she would like to watch. Because I know her. That's where God wants us to be. God's never going to say to you, I would never say to you, ask God how much to give today. Because I think God's never going, why are you asking me? I want to know how much you want to give to my purposes. Because you love me. So we want to get people to that place where what we once learned has become natural to us. We feel what God feels and we think what God thinks. Does that make sense? But most of the time we get stuck somewhere. Let me show you another learning circle. These are not my learning circles. They should be on there where I'm getting them from, at the top right. But there's another how we stop learning. We can put the next slide on, please. So we start off as activists. You have to do something. And now there's some things you wouldn't just say, hey, go and give it a go. You have to teach them like brain surgery, right? It's not like, okay, here's a scalpel, go see how it works, okay? But generally speaking, after some basic teaching, you have to do something to really start learning. Secondly, you have to think about it. Did this work or did this not work? Now some people, they get stuck at doing something. You know people like this, maybe you're something like this. They're always doing something, they're always busy, but they never stop to think, is this working? I know churches like that. Tons of programs, loads of activity, but they've had just as much impact on their community today as they did 5 years ago. It's not necessarily working, but they're super busy, right? Or maybe they have the same kind of, you're always getting into the same kind of relationships with someone. It's always something letting them down because they've not learned the lessons, they've not thought about it. But if we keep growing, we'll think about it, and then thirdly, we'll move on to this where we theorize, okay? We make sense of it. So we've done different things, and now we started, this is where it really gets good, we start to notice principles. Does that make sense? So Jesus mainly taught his disciples principles, because there were many things he didn't have time to teach them in 3 years. So he gave them principles to know what to do when they got questions later on. When he says, all authority of heaven and earth, I'm going to give you the keys to the kingdom, there's what's called a remez there. If you get the book on the Bible, it explains what a remez is. Jesus invokes remez all the time. Basically, it's a way of saying something without saying it. So when he sends out the 70, so the Sanhedrin has 70 people in it, plus the priest, 71. So when he sends them out, it's a remez. What he's basically saying to them is, the Sanhedrin organised the religion of the Jews. I'm going to give you the same authority to organise the religion of this new movement, which we later call Christianity. Does that make sense? And he gives them principles to figure out how to do that, because so many things they're going to have to learn that he's not going to be there to show them. So by his Holy Spirit, and through the principles he's given them, they can make sense of things. Am I making sense here? So we're trying to get, but some people get stuck at reflector. So some people, they've worked out what works and doesn't work. These are the kind of people who say things like, oh, we did that, it didn't work. And you say, oh, great. So how would you do it differently? Oh, no, it just doesn't work. Well, no, maybe. So I know many pastors say, school's book doesn't work. Well, I know it does, but they've asked the question, oh, did that work, did it work? It didn't work. Okay, they're not sort of finding out why. Because if you figure out why, you can change it and make it work. Does that make sense? Yeah. So the power of principles, especially when you can get to that place where you understand the principles behind what you do and how it works, wow, you become very powerful at that point for the kingdom of God. I'm talking about. So what's the next stage then? Well, the next stage is pragmatist. You do it better. Okay, so you've done something. Okay, that didn't work and that didn't work, but this did. Okay, what's the pattern here? What helps me understand? Okay, well, I see. So if I do it this way, it'll work, then you do it differently. I know this is really basic, but people get stuck at these different places. People you could disciple, people in the world, get stuck at these different places. And you can help them. Some people get stuck at pragmatist. What does that look like? Well, now you become an expert at one thing, but the world's forever changing. God wants us to do new things, but we don't like to do new things because who wants to be an idiot again when you're an expert at the first thing? Right? So there are churches who, we want to do discipleship, but right now we know how to put on a good church program, we know how to do this, our church is growing a little bit, that's what we're really interested in. Why would we want to do this whole new thing? It's going to feel awkward and difficult to do, and it's new, it's going to be weird, it's going to make sense. Why do that when you can do this? We already know how to do it. So people get stuck. The question might be, what's the role of the discipler in that? If you're discipling someone, what's the role? And it could be people in the church, but it could be people outside the church. Let me ask you this question. When did the disciples first become Christians? Who can give me an answer to that question? Rianne knows the answer, don't you, Rianne? When did the disciples first, the way we would understand it, in other words, when did they realise Jesus wasn't simply the Messiah, he was God? When do you think they did? Somebody can put a hand up and give me an answer.
Resurrection?
The resurrection? Anybody else got anything else on the record?
Calming of the storm?
Calming of the storm? When they were given the Holy Spirit day of Pentecost? What else? Come on, give me. When
Peter said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God."
Very good. When Peter said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Now, depending on most theologians, don't think that's what he didn't mean. He didn't recognise at that point he's God. Okay, here's the answer. You might want to write this down. We don't know. We don't know. Let me ask you a different question. When did Jesus first start to disciple the disciples? This one's easier. When did Jesus first start to disciple the disciples? When he first called them. Yeah? Okay, so that's interesting because you've all said he discipled them when he first met them or first called them, but later on, they became Christians. And you got the closest in one sense because Peter said, "We have come to believe." So they followed him, and at some point they came to believe. We don't do that. We get people saved, and then maybe we get to disciple them. And if you're a man in America, what that means is someone takes you to Starbucks, you read the Bible, and then they ask you some really awkward accountability questions. That's not discipleship. Discipleship is not me preaching on the love of God to 1,000 people, then getting off stage and getting these 4 guys together and saying, "Hey, let's have a small group and talk about the love of God." That's just preaching to 4 people. It's not discipleship. Discipleship is when you take people on a journey, it makes them itchy, now they start asking you questions. Does this make any sense?
Yes.
So, this is what we're trying to get to. The question is, how do we do that? How do we actually make disciples? And there's a process. So, what I did was, many years ago, I looked at what the rabbis did and how they actually made disciples, and then I created a template, and we'll give that template not now, a bit later on. And it's how to disciple anybody in anything. But the question is, at this point, is what's the role of a disciple in that? Because you could disciple people in the community. When we supplied a church in our community, we had something called nextdoor.com. I don't know if you have it here. But basically, people in the community have a social. It's like Facebook. The only people who can be on are people in the community. So we joined it, and then we told people we're going to plant a church, and it just kicked off for about a week and a half. People are going, "This is great." Other people going, "It's terrible. You shouldn't use this to bring in the church." I mean, it just kicked off. It's all our community. It was a new community, about £1,000. It's all anybody could talk about. One of the neighbours reached out to me, well, a few people, but one of them reached out and said, "Hey, I coordinate this group, and I'm always dealing with all these people falling out and people attacking me for the way I do. I'm amazed at how you're handling this. Could I come and talk to you about how to cope with criticism and how you deal with this?" So I said, "I'd love to, but just so you know, because they knew I was a Christian, I've learned this from Jesus. If you don't mind, I'm going to talk about how Jesus did it." "No, that's fine, I just need to know." So me and Lynn and her husband did the most English thing you can possibly do. We went out for an evening curry. I spent that time just showing them examples of what I did, looking at the things that we did, how we answered these questions, and taking them on experience. Does that make sense? So you can disciple your community by showing them life, what you do in life. As long as you've got that intention to bring Jesus into it at some point. And they know why you do this, and they know where you've learned it from. Don't push people into hearing the gospel, generally speaking. But what you want to do is say, hey, yeah, I'd love to, just so you know, if you want to know, I got this from Jesus, this is all, and if you have any questions about that, and I guarantee at some point they'll ask questions. Maybe not straight away. Sometimes one person told me, no doesn't mean no, it means not yet. So you let people know, and at some point they may lean in to you. Am I making sense here? Okay. So what, if that's what we're going to do in this, when people stop learning, when people get stuck somewhere, what is the role of the disciple? If you could sum up in a sentence, what do you think the role of the disciple is in that? I'm going to give you 3 minutes to discuss that as a group. I'm going to show you what I think the answer is. Okay? So when someone gets stuck, when someone stops learning, what does a disciple need to do? You've got 3 minutes in your group, off you go. Okay. Close to break. Not really, we've got like 1 minute left. Okay, just very quickly, we've got 1 minute and I'm going to explain what we're doing in the next session. Let me just ask you, put your hands up if you have an answer to the question. How do you get people unstuck? How do you keep them moving around? What if there's one principle, one thing you need to do, what might it be? Somebody who's in the group and you've got an answer, you know the will of God. Somebody give away, you must. Okay, this gentleman over here. We've got a microphone.
It's like you said, get them onside them.
Somebody with a microphone. Okay, listen, guys.
It's like I said, get alongside them and ask a question.
Very good. Get alongside them and ask a question. Okay, I might not want to go any further. Let me stick with you for a minute. What kind of question would you ask them? What do you mean by that?
Firstly, if they know they're stuck, so you ask a question alongside, how did you get stuck? Why are you stuck? So by asking questions, you're helping them figure out things.
Okay.
They begin to.
So what if I would suggest that most people don't know they're stuck. So if they're stuck, you know they're stuck, but they're not realising they're stuck. What kind of question might you ask them? Because I think you're on the right track here. What kind of question might you ask them to get them unstuck?
I probably go through the process of why they're stuck and then why you think they're going to do.
Opening question.
I think you're on the right track.
Yeah, it's got to be an open-ended question. Probably have to think about that.
Okay, anybody else got an answer? This is the lady here.
Did you want to go any further?
Only 1 second. There we go.
Do you want to go the next step?
Right, do you want to go next step? That is a brilliant point which we'll talk about in the next session.
All right.
But because I'm not going to talk about that now because that's really important about when you choose a disciple. So straight one. Okay, one more person. Is your lady here?
Are you happy with where you're at?
Okay, you're happy with where you are. Okay. Anything else before I tell you what I think we should do? Okay, so the next slide says this. Be the next stage for them. Okay? Be this. Here's what I would do. Wherever they're stuck, I would suggest you ask them the question that they should be asking if they're at the next stage. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's the key to discipleship, it seems to me. So when I'm discipling someone, I'm trying to think of examples off the top of my head, but when I'm discipling someone, and I'm looking at this, they're really busy, but they're not asking if it's working or not. That's why I ask them. Okay, wow, it's great, Rihanna, you're doing all this amazing work, it's fantastic. Which things are working and which things are not working? As simple as that question is, for some people that's like a revelation. Oh, I didn't think about that, I've just been serving God. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's not, honestly, this is not rocket science, okay? But if they know, and look like, oh yeah, that didn't work or that works, the next question might, and you have to do it quite a lot of time, because what you do it often until it becomes natural to them, right? So you do it often, eventually they start thinking that way. So the next question, the next stage might be, so what's the connection between the things that work and the things that don't work? What do the things that work have in common that the other things don't have in common? Does that make sense? Yeah. And then they come up with principles. So what's happening is, some people say, oh, the rabbis just ask questions because they want people to find, so if I'm a rabbi, let's say Jay, they would say, oh, Paul's asking him questions so Jay can find Jay's own answers. No, Paul's asking Jay questions so Jay can understand my answers, or God's answers, I should say. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you basically ask them the question, you're showing them something, so they want to be like you, they want to do what you're doing, but you're asking questions, they should be thinking if they're on the next stage. Now what's going to happen now is in a minute we're going to have a break. After the break, which is 30 minutes, I'm going to give you a template to disciple anyone and anything. 4 simple steps, no matter what your what is, and what your how is, and who your who are, you can use this template. And I'll give you a copy of the template, but I'm going to explain. What you're going to find is it fits really well with this. And the reason discipleship works so well is it's going to look a bit complicated at first, I promise you it's not, but you can do it with anybody, with anything, and that's what I love about it. So I think we're going to have lunch. Do you want me to say grace, or do you explain something?
Thanks, Paul. Wasn't that great? Great information.